Well, hey, folks, welcome back. This is episode 6 of What's Next Beyond Service. And before I get into introducing today's guest, I got a couple admin notes for folks. Sarah Carell, who is usually on with me, she is in the middle of some life events that are all good. She's got 4 sons, and one of her sons is getting married. So she's taken a couple weeks off to finish pulling her hair out in preparation for all the things that are going into the wedding, all the planning and things. She is so excited, and we're happy for her. So Sarah, I know you're going to see this video because you're going to post it YouTube like you always do. Thanks for doing that, and good luck to you guys. And God bless your son and his new wife moving forward in life, and all the goodness that's going to come out of that. So that's just good stuff. Then the other thing is I had advertised that Charles Wells was going to be on this show as well. He had something come up, it's life, things happen. So he's not going to be here with us. So that's fine. We'll catch him up on the backside with a cup of coffee or something later. And it's all good. So today I'm going to introduce to you the other guy in the duo that I was going to have on. And that's Bernie Jackson or Bernard Jackson. We're friends, so I have the honor of calling him Bernie. Bernie and I have been connected here on LinkedIn a little more than a year, and I think we got connected just right before the pandemic kicked off, or maybe just right in the beginning of that time. I've kind of lost track of that, but I feel like we're old buds. It's just there's something about his posts that resonate with me. And, I'm always looking for his comments when he posts because I get a lot out of it. It's sage advice. It's something that's meaningful. It's something that is easy to understand, the way he writes, the way he communicates. That's what you want from somebody who's a leader, someone who's in charge, someone who is clear, someone who has good advice, and somebody that is, in my opinion, very humble. And those are just all things that I look for in friends and business associates. So there's a natural automatic attraction and a connection with Bernie. And so with that, we had a great call the other day. What I usually do when folks come on this show, I want to talk to them in advance for a comfort level for them and for me, so they can get an idea about the flow of the show. Hey, what are the things we're going to talk about? So we did that. We had a great call, and he even remarked, "Damn, we should have been recording this. This would have been a good show." And so, and that's cool because we kind of hit it off like I knew we would. We have a good relationship on LinkedIn, and I just knew that it would absolutely go into the live thing being the same way. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Bernie. He's going to tell us a couple things about himself, and then we're just going to roll right into the interview and move on from there. So with that, Bernie, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'm not sure how I can top that intro or live up to it. People that know me will be looking, going, "Are they talking about the same Bernie? Is that the same guy I know?" Well, folks, thank you thanks for joining us and listening. My story is pretty short and pretty simple. I come from a family that have served in the military. My grandfather was actually a POW in World War I. My father served actually in Europe, not during the war. And I entered the military. I signed when I was 18 and was supposed to come in on my 19th birthday. How that works out. Ended up coming in 3 days after my 19th birthday, did 22 years, all active duty. The first 6 I was an MP, and the remaining 16 I was in special operations, Green Beret, go 7th Group, go Special Warfare Center. After I got out of the military, and folks, I hate the word retired because that's how I thought of getting out of the military. It was a retirement. It was kind of the end of my life, my working life per se, and I just needed a job to get by for a few years until I finally retired. Enough said on that, but so I really don't like the word retired from the military, but I did my 22 and I got out. I entered the corporate world, having absolutely zero knowledge of what the corporate world was about. Absolutely zero. I put out a post a couple weeks ago about starting 2 rungs up from the bottom, and when I left, being 2 rungs from the top. That is so accurate, because my learning and how much learning and appreciation for the people who taught me is just so much, completely mind-blowing. And to be frank and honest, I think I learned more about management and leadership post my military service than during my military service, because I had to start learning soft skills and applying those soft skills. So for the last 2018, I ended my corporate work. I worked for the same company for 13 years, survived 3 acquisitions within that company, and I had enough. So I left the corporate world after 13 years, kicked around for about 18 months, and then started considering franchising and or running my own business, my wife and I. So currently I'm a business owner, small service disabled company. And you know, it's new. I started from the ground up. I made a decision that I wanted to start at the very bottom and low and learn and grow that way. I'm not creating a job for myself. I'm creating a business. So that's where I'm at now. I'm actually honored to have met Scott, and there are so many others on LinkedIn. I became active. I've had an account with LinkedIn for probably 5 or 6 years, but I didn't become active till probably about 18 months ago. So having said all that, Scott, I hope you have enough.
That's perfect.
So
that's perfect, Bernie. And you know, that's cool to hear. You know, the last part of what you said, the last 2 parts, that you've learned a very different type of business acumen, I guess is the way.
Absolutely.
Because it's different on the outside, right? You know, those soft skills, you know, sometimes you learn some of those in the military, but a lot of times, you know, depending on what branch you were in, depending on what your job was, you know, who you were, you know, snake eating with or whatever, you know, some of that stuff, you know, may or may not apply. And you absolutely have to learn those skills on the outside, because it is very different. And I think there's an EQ portion of that as well, you know, that emotional quotient thing. Some folks, you know, kind of, you know, say, not so much. Others are really big into it. I tend to think it's an important thing to have in your toolkit with you. But that's one thing. But the other was that you are a business owner now. I didn't quite catch that, you know, in previous discussions or, you know, or on LinkedIn. I think that's huge. So I'm kind of excited to, you know, as we go through the process of discussion here, talking about that, you know, as much as you want to talk about that, because, you know, as we talked about on the phone the other day, you know, sometimes, you know, starting your own business or partnering, there's a lot of challenges. In fact, you posted about that today, as a matter of fact, about being ready for something, you know, when you start a business. And I want to chat about that too. So no, that's cool. And then I guess one more thing is about people on LinkedIn, about, you know, meeting me on LinkedIn, and there's others, you know, we're connected to a lot of the same folks, and
right.
Not that there's a clique, because I don't like that word. Some folks say tribe, you know, finding your tribe. Maybe that's a better word. I don't know. But there are certainly folks that you tend to pay attention to on LinkedIn. And as I talked about, you know, you're absolutely one of mine. And I'm, you know, I appreciate that I'm one of yours too. It helps me know that I must be doing something okay if guys like you are interested in what I'm talking about or what I'm doing. So that's a good feeling, to know that you're either interesting enough or you're providing some value to people on LinkedIn, because that's what it's about for me. And I know it is for you too, you know, sharing your time and experience. You're doing it so you can help others. And you also want to learn too, because there's a lot, we're always learning. So those are great aspects of what you talked about in your intro, and I get that. I appreciate that.
Hey, Scott, can I say something on that real quick?
Yeah, sure. First,
So,
absolutely.
one, I appreciate that you recognized how I post because it was a lesson. I had to learn that. I started 18 months ago, didn't have a clue about social media. It was part of my journey of learning social media and how to write posts and so on and so forth. The truth of the matter is I hate reading, and I hate reading long posts because I end up skimming. That's really all it is. I just end up skimming. So, and I've watched some of the individuals that I felt were successful and good. And what I came down to was make sure you're focusing only on one item or one area at a time. Because what would happen is I started writing and I'd run out of characters. And I read back and it's, well, I'm talking about 2 or 3 different things here. Stop. Just focus on one thing at a time. Keep it short. You don't have to go into great detail because you can do that down into discussions. Because the end result is you're hoping someone else responds to this and it impacts somebody, or someone has a comment or an add to it. They're not full discussions. They're just bits and pieces to make people think.
Right.
And so I'm not writing the question and the answers. I'm just putting the information out there. And frankly, most of the things that I post about are reminders to myself, lessons that I've learned. And I've learned some lessons the hard way. Matter of fact, I think that's how I learned lessons mostly, the hard way.
Yeah, I've got calluses all on my knuckles, but from dragging,
Exactly. So, I mean, it's just one of those, that's how I post. So thank you. I appreciate you recognizing that. But the reality is one of the things I see people do is, one, write an entire dissertation in one post and cover multiple subjects. Just cover one subject at a time and keep it that way. So
yeah, I think that's stellar advice, because you're right. If you start doing too much, it kind of draws your, what are you supposed to pay attention to? It's like, what's, if you do it the way you say it, it's very clear, it's concise, your message is right there. No one has to search for it. And like we talked about on the phone the other day, Napoleon's corporal, right? There'd be this op order, and he'd have them bring in a corporal and have him look at it. And if he understood it, then by God, that's a hell of an op order, because those are the guys that have to execute it. And if they're scratching their backside or their head, then you failed, and you failed the folks that have to do the operation. So same thing, same kind of concept or mindset when you're spending your time putting together nuggets of wisdom for people. You don't want them to have to, think too hard about what you're saying. I mean, some things are profound, maybe, but when you can provide those wiggets, or those nuggets of wisdom, rather, those can be epiphanies for people too. It's like, say, holy crap, you know what? I never thought of it that way. Or, hey, that's how you do that. Or, yeah, hey, I'm a knucklehead, because, I didn't do that, or I should have done that. So those are all very positive things that keep people, I think, coming back to what you're doing. And like I said, I always, if I don't see something from you in a few days, I'll go looking for you, because I'm thinking either, he's busy doing something else, which, that happens, or something's not right with my feed. I know sometimes when I comment on certain things, boy, my feed changes.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know why. I wind up getting stuff from 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And I've got a lot of people I'm connected with, and I know they all just didn't stop posting. So why is my feed turning into things that I've already seen from 2 or 3 weeks ago and nothing new? I find that odd. So if I don't see something from you, I'm thinking, well, I must have made a comment about something that somebody didn't like, or I don't know. So then I go searching for you, and hoping that you're still on LinkedIn, and nothing crazy's happened. But
well, for the first year, I posted almost every day. And because I'm doing different things now, I'm only posting maybe once, twice, possibly 3 times a week, which is enough to keep my feed going, keep my network. I still go on every, most days and at least comment or like other people's information.
Right.
I truly have an entire list of things that I can post about. But the irony is every time I do one of those lists, I think of something else. So when I sit down at the computer, I type that instead of what's on my list.
Yeah, that'll happen. Yeah. And I'm kind of along the same path as you. I really got in heavy to LinkedIn when I was asked to do it's like a 20-day challenge, the Grateful Challenge. And so I started, doing videos every day, and then I kind of liked that. And so I was doing videos, not videos every day, but trying to post every day and then throwing videos in during the week too. And now that I'm doing this What's Next Beyond Service, I'm posting less because I'm busy looking to get folks to come on the show. What are we going to talk about? Creating the advertisement, if you will, for who's going to be on, and building the palette, so to speak, to advertise and to focus on those videos. So I'm spending less time, writing. So I do the same thing that you do. I'm looking, and I'll react and I'll comment on people's posts, but I'm not necessarily out there talking as much as I was at one time. And I think some of that's cyclical. Everything in life is cyclical. So.
It is. Well, the mistake that I see people make, and I made this mistake, and we can get into it further later on, is the understanding of networking. And I'm horrible at it, just to be quite frank and quite honest, but I've learned some tremendous lessons about it. You're never building one network. You have to build multiple networks, depending on what your function and your goals are. So I see individuals that are transitioning, and they get hot and heavy into LinkedIn. They get a job and they're gone. Well, what happens is they've lost all that network. So that, the average time, I think Gary posted last week, the average time an individual holds a job is 3.2 years. So what happens in 3.2 years is they've now developed business acquaintances. And business acquaintances are not your network. They can be part of it, but as soon as you leave that organization or that job or that position, for lack of a better word, you're no longer of any use to them.
Right.
So you lose that part of that network that you thought you had. So you have to start from ground zero once again. The ideal goal is build multiple networks or one big network that supports everything. If I need to get a job, okay, I have the network and connectivity that I can continue to do that. But don't let those networks or individuals within your network die on a vine because stay in touch. If that means send them a note once a month or once a quarter or during Christmas and holidays, so you stay in touch with them. It doesn't mean you have to communicate with them every day. And that's something that I see happening with a lot of the individuals that transition is they find a job and they stop. Don't do that.
No, you're
you're
absolutely right. No, that's great advice. And because for all the reasons that you said, and then you also, if you're doing it right here on LinkedIn, again, talking about that kind of a tribe thing, or, you build a group of trusted advisors, so to speak, because you've been interacting with them and you see the way their mind works and you see what they have, you know who's good for what type of advice as well. So you want to keep those folks relatively close because, hey, things happen in business, things happen in life. And it's good to be able to have folks you can bounce things off of. And you don't have to necessarily do it in the open. You send them a DM, say,
Absolutely.
hey, here's the deal. And a lot of good things happen behind the scenes on DMs. And so you're exactly right. Don't cast your line out there, catch that fish, and then take the boat in. You gotta be out there trolling in a good way, not trolling in a bad way, but you got to be out there keeping, tending the lines, I guess is probably the best way to say it.
I made that mistake, and that's why I bring that to people's attention. I made that mistake 100%. So there I am, mid-50s, left the company, and now I have to start networking again, because either I'm going into a different market sector, or the market sector that I knew and was well connected in is no longer viable. So I had to start again. And quite frankly, that's why I ended up on LinkedIn. And I will tell you, I took one of those personality tests that says whether you're an introvert or extrovert. I fell right in the middle, literally right in the middle. So what that means is I can communicate outside, I can engage people, I can do things like this, but it takes a toll because inside I'm really an introvert. So sometimes I have to force myself to go outside and do those things. But I'm horrible. So here you go, Scott. You have a individual in their mid-50s who's not working, who's looking to develop a network. So who does that individual really want to talk to? Do I want to talk to the project managers? Do I want to talk to the program managers, the VPs, the directors? What level? And do they really want to talk to a guy that's, you see my resume. What do they see when they see that? So it becomes a challenge. And honestly, that's kind of what forced me into doing what I'm doing now. It is what it is. I don't want to say I'm not sympathetic, but it's one of those, well, you got to do something, so do it. Get out there and do it. So.
And we learn by doing. I think we talked about that on the phone the other day too. And and I've said this a couple times in the previous shows that I've hosted here so far with What's Next. Is I think it's Yogi Berra. Is he the guy that said you don't know what you don't know? I mean, he has all kinds of sayings like that, but that's so true too. And you wind up experiencing things and you learn from it. And hopefully those are things that when you're learning them, it's not a terminal thing that things got that bad. Hopefully you're able to kind of see something, figure it out, and then shift gears and move in a different direction or at a different rate of speed, whatever it takes. And you're so right. You got to stay engaged, I think, on LinkedIn, because you never know what's going to happen in life. You never know what's going to happen career-wise. And having those folks, those different spheres of connectivity, influence, whatever you want to call it, I think is hugely important. So so let's do this.
Sorry, I got you off the agenda. Sorry about that.
Oh no, hey, you know what? But this is good too. I like the free flow, and sometimes having an agenda, you don't want to be too rigid, and that's all good. Like I said, this is it's you and I chatting, so whatever we do is absolutely cool. I do want to talk a little bit about your military background, because that's what a lot of this program's about, is folks who are in the military, what are the things they did, but it's more so the things you and I were just talking about now, because those things are timely and relevant. But can you, is there anything that you want to share about your military service? Anything in particular?
Well, I didn't realize the benefits of it while I was doing it. And quite frankly, I didn't realize how badass we really were until after I got out.
Yeah, there you go.
I did 6 years as an MP and enjoyed it. Ninth Infantry Division. I was Division MP twice, two divisions. Ninth ID, which was my first duty assignment, and that really got me on the path of. I had a great platoon sergeant, just phenomenal. And he was real laid back, and this is Vietnam era. I mean, when I was in, these guys still had experience from Vietnam. So he was laid back, just a good guy. And from there, I went to Europe. I was on special munitions locations. Came back to Colorado. So I had 17 choices of where I could go. And I said, well, let me think. I enjoyed Washington State. So why don't I go to Colorado? Well, not the brightest thing that I ever did. And the reason is because, Washington State, Fort Lewis is on the western side of Washington State, right? Fort Carson, Colorado is kind of in the dead center, but it's on the eastern side of the Rockies.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is. My brother was stationed there. My dad was in the Air Force. We were at the academy. My dad was a musician, and so he was stationed at the academy. Doing his job there. But I know exactly. I know where Peterson Air Force Base is too. Right, pretty close. But yeah. So
I get off the airplane. I come back from Germany, and I get off the airplane. I walk into the airport, and I look out that big. How airports are wide open. I look out that big window, and I see one tree on the horizon. I'm like, uh-oh, I made a mistake. I turn around, and there's Cheyenne Mountain right behind me. But I literally spent 1 year to the day, almost to the day, at Fort Carson. I probably spent almost as much time at Fort Irwin and Pinyon Canyon that I spent on Fort Carson per se. Had a great time. From there, I was headed back. I put in my Special Forces packet while I was there. So a platoon sergeant calls me in one day. He goes, "So what are you going to do?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, sir?" I was E5 E5 at the time. "What are you going to do?" I go, "I'm going to Special Forces." He goes, "No, you're not." He throws my packet on the table. He goes, "It's been denied." My EKG had become separated from my physical exam, and therefore it was denied with the note of reapply. He goes, "So let me tell you what you're going to do. You're on levy back to Germany." And I'm like, so what happens with that is I now have to complete 2/3 of my tour in Europe before I can reapply to Special Forces.
Oh, wow.
So I had to go back to Europe for 2 years. On the way, I picked up canine school. So I was a dog handler, one of the best jobs I ever had. Dogs will not lie to you. I loved it. No, I mean, if you train with them, you're going to see it. Back after I did Europe again, and then came back for the qualification course, and that's probably one of the first times I heard people really talk about just don't quit. As long as you keep moving forward. That's why on my posts I usually put lean forward. For us in the Army, it was always lean forward in the foxhole. Because you're leaning up against that frontal edge, but it's always lean forward. And when you're carrying that 60-pound tick on your back, it's kind of hard not to lean forward. So I came back, I did the qualification course, 3 weeks of a grueling, really, really, it was a great opportunity. Because I saw a lot of people that had tried to G2 or get the information about the course, and what they did was they psyched themselves out. Whereas I had zero knowledge of it. And so we went through the selection, came back, and I went through 2 years of training to be a Special Forces medic. And from there, I was assigned to 7th Group. So here's something you never tell a company or battalion sergeant major. So I'm there. I'm talking.
It's a good thing Charlie Wells isn't on, right?
He would have appreciated this. He would have appreciated this. But it also gives you a little understanding of what I'm like.
Sure.
So I'm talking to this first sergeant over at the Language School, and he goes, "What you need to do is you need to put your resume together. And while you're on leave between completing the Q course, go over to the group and talk to the sergeant majors and see what's available and where to go." So he was basically talking about being proactive with career management. So what do? I go over to 2nd Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group. Knock on the door. "Can I speak with Sergeant Major?" Sergeant Major's got someone else that he's talking to. So I'm basically at his door. I haven't been allowed to come in yet. I'm at his door, and I'm in E6 this time, I think. What do you do? Rah, rah, rah. Okay. What's your MOS? Rah, rah, rah. Why do you want to come to my battalion? Sergeant Major, I'm not sure I want to come to your battalion. Hold right there. Takes me right down to the Alpha Company. He goes, this is where you're assigned. I'm like, wow. And of course, in group, we have sergeant majors at battalion and company level. So of course, my company sergeant major goes, look, let me give you the word of advice. If battalion sergeant major ever asks you why you want to come to this battalion, lie to them, but don't say, I don't know if I want to come to your battalion. But that, so that was my reputation, my first day in group. Had a great time.
Great shooter.
So I was on the same team for almost 5 years. I saw every position filled with a new guy, and that new guy leave before the light bulb went off and said, Bernie, you're not doing something right. So got a chance to become an intel sergeant also, and from there I went over to the schoolhouse. And here's something that a lot of our military guys need to think about and how it applies to the civilian world. Is you do one job for a long period of time, and it doesn't matter if you're doing it, it's the exact same geographic location, but when you go to a new location, it opens your opportunities up to learn more skills. And really, this is where I learned about the support mechanisms. Because prior to that, I was just a team guy. What do you mean I can't have that? I want this. I need that. It was give me. But then I learned the behind the scenes, what it takes to get you that. 10 guys for every one infantryman per se. So that was an eye opening, and it also allowed me to understand more of the command and higher echelons. So it was a really, really good. So I returned to group, and guess where they sent me? Right back to the same battalion, the same company. So I ended up taking over a team, a door kicker team in Alpha Company again, and it was phenomenal. So I decided that 20 was going to be my limit, and then Afghanistan kicked off, and so I wasn't going to leave in the middle of that. So I got to go over to Afghanistan, take my team over to Afghanistan for 7-8 months. Ended up building fire bases, doing great things. I came back and went to the NCO Academy and worked there for about a year. But by then I'd made a decision. I wasn't looking for further promotion or movement. It was, I'm done. I've got to get out. It was just time for me to go.
Right.
I knew it. I actually included my family in the decision because I said, look, I could stay in, and this is what's going to, and about that time, my daughter was like, I was like, okay, I'm done. So went on terminal leave, didn't have a clue what I was going to do. I had my degree already. I had done that. Didn't have a clue what I wanted to do or where I was going to do it, but I didn't want to be a contractor overseas, although I could have made really good money at that time, and I wanted to learn management from the civilian side. So I made the decision I would either be an instructor, training development, or get into a management field. Although I really hate herding cats. I hate at the lowest level. That's really not me. I do poorly at the really, really lowest level. I'm better at the planning, strategy, and so on. I've learned that about.
Well, and that's good that you know your strengths, right? A lot of times folks don't necessarily get that, and they flounder a bit with that. Yeah, something you said I want to go back to real quick. A couple things you said. One, and I think this is a great learning point for folks that are currently serving, and even for folks that aren't, because every organization is built of people, and everyone has a function. And some folks are the folks that are out on the tip of the spear, whether they're the sales guys, or the support people. And the support folks, there's different components and levels of support that go in, that get, rifled in to supporting the main effort. And you're right, Bernie, a lot of times those guys are looking forward with their hands back, saying, give me, give me, give me. And that's okay. I get that. But the guys that really do well and that, in my experience, do well in terms of more than just meeting the mission are the guys that did exactly what you said, that stopped and looked around and saw that, hey, if I want X, I should probably understand who I need to talk to, what I need to do. Do I need to meet them halfway on the bridge? Or do I have to come across the bridge and knock on their door because maybe something went wrong? And if I'm just blindly standing on the other end of the bridge, waiting for shit to show, waiting for stuff to show up. Sometimes that's the expectation, and that's what's got to happen. But once you understand that there's more people involved than you and your mission, you're going to better enable your people and your mission because you're getting involved. Not that you're doing other people's jobs, but you understand and you're able to enable and make things happen better because you build those relationships too. And that's really a big deal. And the other thing you said was at some point you realized you knew roughly when you were going to transition and that you brought your family into the consideration and discussion and eventual decision making. And that's huge. I did the same thing. I won't get into my transition story, but it came quicker than I wanted to. They were going to, I had orders, but then they just said we want to keep you another year. And then that would have caused a domino effect on other things. So I talked with the family and it was just like, it was time to go, so that's what I did too. And so now you had a good career. You've learned a lot, and now you're shifting gears, and you've already laced up your boots for the last time. Now you're walking out into this, kind of like being in Colorado again. You walk out, there's this big open plain, right? What the heck am I going to do? What do I want to do? That's something that some people magically figure out, and it's all good. Some people are just fortunate, I guess, but a lot of times when you get out, you're not sure what you want to do, or maybe you know what you don't want to do, right? But you're not sure what you want to do. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that. I think a lot of folks struggle with, I didn't expect that I was going to miss the military as much as I'm actually missing it. Some things you don't give a crap about, you don't ever want to see again.
Yeah.
But there are other things that you're not going to find elsewhere. The camaraderie and that absolute sense of purpose. So it's a struggle in many ways when people leave. And I think it's especially harder for senior folks because have vested so much of their life into that culture and into taking care of people. And when you leave that, boy, you miss it. The people thing you miss. And so there's a lot to consider. People don't understand it until they've been through it. Just like we talked about earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And so you're at that point, you're moving forward. What do you want to share about that? Anything?
So here's everything you just said is accurate. I'll be honest with you, there were things that I missed, but I was actually more excited to learn than I was of missing things, because what ended up happening was I just created the things that I missed. Teams, it doesn't change. Whether it's civilian or military, you still have a propensity to create those things that work for you. You still have the ability to help and impact people. It doesn't change anything. So times were different for me.
Hey, Bernie, people, I'm interrupting, but people absolutely need to hear that. See, that's what I like about you. What you just said.
Well, that's one thing at least.
No, it's crystal clear, and it's something that people need to hear because folks do struggle with that, and then they forget that they have the power to create their circumstances and to empower others and do exactly what you said. So thanks for saying that. That's good stuff.
Well, it's in my case, it was the truth. So things were different when I retired. and again, I hate that word, but when I transitioned, there wasn't LinkedIn, there wasn't Michael Quinn or Herb or Matt or Gary or any of these guys. It wasn't that way. They were still advocating taking your resume and sending it to people. So what I did was, one, I took a few months off until my wife finally said, okay, you're cramping my style. It's time you got to do something. So what I did is I typed up a resume. I could probably still find a copy of it in my desk here. And I went out and knocked on doors because I said, well, let's see. They're going to remember me if I at least knock on their door. And so I went out to military contracting companies that were here in town. And, one guy was like, I don't have anything for you. And I'm like, okay. Another one at a large company they wouldn't even open their door for me. It's like, okay. So one small company, I handed my resume in, and 2 days later, I get a phone call from them. Hey, we have a need and a requirement to do pre-deployment training. Can you do that? And I'm like, sure, absolutely, because it's one of the things that I taught military and their families going to high threat areas.
Right.
Force protection, self-protection, all this stuff. So, of course, that afternoon, I'm supposed to go in and meet them the next day. So that afternoon, I put a little course together, a little outline of what I would assume would be in a course or a program. I go in the next day and I find out that I'm in a meeting not only with a representative from the company, the HR, but also one of their partners. And at the table, they're discussing what they think would need to be trained. So I reach into my thing, I hand him a piece of paper, he looks at it. Oh, okay. So I start working as a 1099. So here's how naive I was, Scott. I didn't have a clue what a 1099 versus a W-2 was.
Right.
That's completely how naive I was.
A lot of folks are.
They bring me on as a 1099. I put this pre-deployment training together. It's getting bigger. They'd want a large contract. It's getting bigger. I'm coming into the office, teaching the course, and as it's continued to grow, they like me even more. So I now have another instructor that is working with me, and then I'm step away from actually doing the instruction to creating training for other things. To now I'm actually going out CONUS wise and teaching other events.
You're building their business.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was expanding their business. And at the same time, what they saw in me was something I didn't realize, because I just went in with my normal, hey, stuff's got to get done, let's do it. Step forward, keep leaning forward. They asked me to come on as a W-2, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. Kept going, and finally the light bulb went off my head. I said, yeah, okay. I mean, I liked a little bit of flexibility as it was. So I took over basically their CONUS operations, CONUS training, and I got into business development because it needed to be done. I had never written a proposal in my life. I learned. We lost that proposal. But from there, it just continued to grow. And what I liked about business development is it's competitive. You have to analyze it, and you learn so much about not only just what you're working on. You have to be intimately familiar with all the operations that are going on in the company. You have to know how to price things and how to work with prices. You have to develop teams of other companies and bring their strengths and mitigate your weaknesses. So it's an overall. So I started doing that, and quite frankly, I got quite good at it. So I created this entire business development section because the company was growing. And I actually was offered an opportunity to own a percentage of the company. which I took. I actually started another company with 4 of the KMPs. And that was my message earlier today, was know what you're getting into, basically, and plan for your divorce. And I'm glad we did, because after 6 months, I was like, okay, I see what's happening here. I need to step away from this now,
Right.
before something else spins out of control here. And we had the ability to do that. So what that first company, and it was a small service disabled veteran owned company, what the best thing about that company was the people allowed me the opportunity to grow. Now, I won't sit here and tell you it was the best experiences, because I had some pretty significant experiences while I was at that company. But I learned tremendously. So, people that are getting out right now, your first job doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be you need to create a landing zone, an LZ, that's a place for you to start, and maybe you can start kicking off missions from there. You create your LZ, you get your perimeter out there so it's safe, it's secure, you're moving forward, and then you can further define what you want to do and what you want to be. I was lucky that the company I was
Here we go again. Here we go again. You're absolutely putting it in a language that folks are going to get and they're going to understand. I swear, what you're talking about now, I call it a base head, to make it more understandable to folks that aren't in the military when you're talking to them. But absolutely, Bernie, sometimes you just need to get on base.
Absolutely.
And then you have a chance to score, to advance to second, third, and hopefully get across the home plate and score that big win for yourself career-wise. And that's perfect. That's fantastic advice, because there are so many people that say, oh, you got to know what you want to do. Well, that's true. That's a good thing to do.
But you need to know what direction you want to head.
Yeah,
you don't
right.
need specifics.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but
no.
So you got your LZ and you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So I got my, I had my LZ, but here's what I learned, and I learned this the hard way. The markets change. Company goals change. So this has left a lasting mark on me. So I get a call the night before, one of the VPs. It's like, hey, I need you in at 6 a.m. Like, uh-oh. So here's the thing with business development. You know how the company's doing, good and bad, because you know the numbers.
Right.
It's like, okay, so is it my turn? And it is what it is. So he comes in the next morning, and oh, by the way, my G2 line had called me in between there. And it wasn't me. It was one of my team members who I'd worked with for almost 6-7 years, and several other individuals within the company were getting the axe.
Ooh.
So, and it wasn't because of the poor performance. It was truly because they had jobs that were being duplicated, and the company was streamlining.
Yeah, those things happen.
So from that day forward, I had what paper comes in, the paper for your printer machines and stuff.
Right, the ring boxes. Yeah.
Right. I had one of those sitting in my office because it was there to remind me that I could be here today and gone tomorrow, and everything that was mine within that office needed to fit in that box.
Wow.
And it's, I don't, that it just left that kind of mark on me to understand that I could have a job today and be gone tomorrow for no reason of my own.
Right.
I could have been doing everything right, but it also attuned me to what was going on at the company level or at the higher echelons. So there are a lot of politics that go on in the civilian world. Anyone that tells you there aren't is not experienced enough to know.
Right. Absolutely.
There are decisions that are made. There are careerists that are there punching a ticket. that have their own agenda. It happens. So what? You know, be yourself, be who you are, and do the best that you can and learn. Continue to learn. So, a couple points before we move on. So, in my job as director of business development, you know, I did some hiring and I actually did some terminations. As a hiring manager, I wanted individuals that were qualified, and my recruiter gave me individuals that had qualifications that met the requirements. I didn't see individuals until they met the requirements.
Right.
So when you came to my desk in my office and you were given an offer, that was your best and final. I wasn't being arrogant. I don't start out trying to lowball you, but within an organization, there are payroll scales and standards. And most organizations that I was associated with try to maintain a level so that I'm paying you the same price that I'm paying the person next to you, with some variations based on seniority and knowledge and qualifications. So just keep that in mind, and your benefits. And I know people like to negotiate benefits, and sometimes you can, but the bigger companies, that's not really a negotiable item because they have their benefits packages already determined.
Right.
You know, people tell you, oh, negotiate your benefits, negotiate your salary. Well, you know, sometimes that's not. And you don't have to be arrogant or obnoxious or rude when you ask this or negotiate it. You just have to be straightforward. Is there any leeway here? Yes, no? Okay. Then can we discuss it further? Right. If there's not, then you know where they're at. They're not trying to lowball you, maybe. That may be what they bid or what they're able to pay. So you make the decision because everybody has a choice. You can work or you cannot work for the company. So,
well, that's the unvarnished truth, isn't it? And it's also a perspective that's good to hear and understand, because a lot of folks don't necessarily know that when they're going into that situation, and they don't understand what's happening on the other side of the net. So right. That's good info.
That's 100% true. I mean, recruiters want to fill their vacancies. They want you to succeed. They are your broker, per se. So if you get a recruiter to call you back, they're hoping that you fill that vacancy so that they can move on to their others. They right. with you. Use them to help you be better at your interviews, because it's in their best interest that you're hired, per se. Right. To think about something that I had no clue about before. So here's the reality of how I got hired at my first job. I was the first guy on the top of the pile that had the experience that they needed, because Jennifer, who was the HR assistant at the time, her filing pattern of new resumes was literally a stack at the side of her desk that was 24 inches tall. If we had a new requirement, she'd go, I think I have someone that might do that. She'd pick up that entire stack and go through it. My resume was at the top of the pile, and they remembered me because I'd been in there 2 days prior. That's how I got my first job out of the Army. That's just how it worked.
How things have changed, right? It's,
absolutely.
Very different world out there. Sometimes some of the change is good, and others not so much. The whole resume battle is crazy nowadays. Yes, they have the software that can go and scan those keywords and phrases, and if you don't know that, and if you don't take advantage of some of the things on your side that can help you, not necessarily cut and paste, but for lack of a better word, cut and paste what it is the business wants, put it on a document that can reshape your resume to put in those words and those things that they want to see. But still, it's your resume, right? If you can make that jump, then chances are your resume might get past the first hurdle, which is a big deal. And they've depersonalized a lot of it too. You'll send a resume out and you never hear back, and I always I always appreciated hearing back, whether it was a thumbs up or thanks but no thanks. At least you knew that you could move to the next objective and not be hoping and wondering, anxious about, hey, am I going to get a look? Am I going to interview? Will I get hired for this? And yeah, so many things have changed. And LinkedIn, I think, is an incredible tool. Obviously, you do too, because we're on LinkedIn. But the more you know about LinkedIn and the more that you're willing to understand that networking is a huge part of getting a job, because the resume is going to only do so much. That who you know and who knows you thing is so true. And if you can leverage the power that LinkedIn provides to be able to build that network, folks, when a job comes up and they know Bernie, it's like, hey, this is easy. Let's DM Bernie. Let's call Bernie and ask him, hey, what do you got going on? What do you think about this opportunity? And opportunities will come to you, a lot of times. You're not even in the receive mode, and people are contacting you and saying,
look at this opportunity for me.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm serious. I appreciate you asking me to come on. And for me, it's just part of my learning. Again, Charlie's been trying to get me to do video for the last year. It's just not how I do stuff. But
yeah, it's not for everybody. He's particularly good at it, right? He has a knack. He's very likable. He's funny. He has good topics. He's interesting.
So here's the first time I saw Charlie on here. My initial reaction: who's this preppy guy in his garage telling people how to get out of the military? What the heck is this? That was my first. I was like, and then of course I came back to it. I'm like, oh, hey, he's got some pretty good stuff actually. Hey, he's a good. And I've going back and forth DMing him a few times, and he's got a lot, and he's making things happen for himself and his family. He's actually managing his career and his transition just like he managed his transition. Yeah. And I'm happy for him. I'm excited to see what he does next. I know which direction he's headed, so I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I am too. I think he's kind of created, at least for folks in the military, a channel, if you will. I think a lot of folks are anticipating what he's going to do next, and they glean that value, just like I glean value from what you do. You do something different, and so does he. But the information that you both put out there is relevant. It's something that's understood, and it makes sense. That's when you have to go through and rack your brain to try to, am I missing something here with this guy? If you're having to do that, that's not going to last long. But what you guys are doing is opening the eyes and ears of people, and it's helping. And that's, to me, it's obvious that Charlie and you are doing what you do on LinkedIn to help others. And if it helps you too, that's icing on the cake, right? Because that's important to learn and, help yourself. But if you're able to talk to folks and make something more understandable or provide information to them that will help them in the decision-making process, in the transition process, even if it's something that's just a daily task that's work-related, there's ways to do things. And having that aperture, that broad aperture of conversation, whether it's transition or whether it's, business development or operations, all those things happen in real time, and having people that have the experience, the knowledge and the wisdom in those areas, or they're sharing and doing it again in a way that is easy to digest and understand. The best part about that is because it is easy to understand, you can move to take an action. And It's always about implementing, the action, the operations, the execution piece of knowledge. Knowledge is powerful, but knowledge doesn't do much sitting around. It's got to be leaning forward, like you say. And
well, we talked about transition, and about 6 or 8 months ago, I posted, and again, thank you. I appreciate the accolades about my content, but I post things to remind myself and hopefully others to educate themselves on. The owner of the first company I worked for, he said to me, he goes, it usually takes 3 years for people to transition. He goes, you're way ahead of the power curve. And I had only been out 6, 8 months. And that's because I was hungry to learn what the civilian world was like. I was hungry to engage, and I kind of switched off some of the military. But he was wrong. And like I said, I posted about this. He was wrong also because I don't think transition has a time period. I think you will continue to transition the rest of your life if you're smart enough to recognize it. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but hey, that's how I talk. You have to be able to recognize and challenge that you need to continue to grow. And for me, that's what it's about. I still transition. So here's examples, and I love watching people transition on LinkedIn just in the last 18 months. So everybody knows Michael Quinn. Everybody knows him. But if you've been following him, you see that he's transitioning still. He went from a company he worked for a year, learned some new skills, went to EY, learned some more new skills, and is now running his own business using some of those skills and continuing to learn.
Yep.
That's perfect. If you look at Charlie was still active. He was learning new skills, helping his transition. He got a job, had something come up that he'd already been working on, and he's continuing to transition. Transition doesn't start and stop on a certain day.
Right.
It's a growth. Transition should be growth. And that's what it is. And I love watching people on here actually grow. And it's not just those two individuals. You've been transitioning because you've been learning more and more video. Like you and I joked about it the other night about, I saw you in your RV making videos at first. Now you're doing this. That's transitioning. You're becoming and identifying who you want to be as a civilian. You're always going to have that military in you. You will always have those unique qualities and skill sets. But you're learning more and you're challenging yourself to be a better you. So transition doesn't start and end the day you leave the military or 24 months prior or 24 months after. It's a continuing growth factor.
Yeah, I agree. It's a continuum. And I always say, if you're not growing, you're slowing.
Yeah.
And that's so true. Because once you stop growing and learning, things slow down, and then you start to atrophy, and skill.
Absolutely.
Things that you want to keep going, just like you don't want your LinkedIn network to lapse, right? Same thing. You're growing and building. So now, let me do a quick time hack. I think we started about 10 after, so we're about at an hour now, which flew by. And I told you this was going to happen. It's, when you got someone good on, it's like you're just having a session. You forget about, oh my gosh, we're recording because we have a time hack to want to try to stay in, but it's fine. This has been a absolute good conversation. Not that my other conversations haven't been good. They've all have been good and they all are purposeful. I think on this one, we talk a lot more about the after transition piece and the things that are important to know in the business world. We haven't really talked a whole lot about that on my other calls. And I think this puts it into a different category. And I think folks really want to hear what you talked about. It's good to talk about people's military past, right? Because that's a connection that we can all share.
Yeah.
It makes you, relatable because, oh, hey, that's the guy that was a special forward. He's a Green Beret guy. What the heck's he doing now? And so what the heck he's doing now is what I really want what I'm doing here to be about, because it gives people that guidepost to know that, hey, that guy did what he did in the military, and now look at him. And he's turning back. He's that guy that's putting that hand out there to help give me a foot forward. He's not going to do it for me, but he's going to tell me things because he gives a damn and he wants to share. He wants to help me in my movement forward. And that's tremendous. I think you've done a lot of that today in our conversation. I think you're going to go back and look at this, and then you're going to probably say, "Oh, I wanted to talk about that too," and we didn't have time. But there's always another time to bring you on down the road. So where I'm going with this is, as we're getting ready to close out here, what you're doing now. You talked about you've created your business, and you said you're not creating a job for you. You're creating a business. There's a difference, right? There's absolutely a difference in that. And so if you can take some time to tell me whatever you want to tell me about what you're doing now, and then if there's any volunteer stuff you're doing, just whatever you want to talk about.
So let me back up just a little bit, Scott, so I can set the, So at the end of 2017, after working for the same company, actually going through 3 acquisitions, really working for the same original company, I was managing all the linguists in 8 countries, or I was managing the contract for all the linguists supporting our troops in 7 countries, I think, at the time, not including Afghanistan, but all the folks in Iraq and Syria and several other countries. I completely burned myself out. And I would not have admitted that 2 or 3 years ago. Would not admit it, because you keep going, you keep pressing, there's no sympathy, there's no quit. The reality was I completely burnt myself out. I was out of shape completely. Physically, I was a wreck. Mentally, I was surviving. And I didn't feel that I was quite honestly, I would go to work going, okay, it wasn't challenging to me anymore. And believe me, I was dealing with challenging stuff, but it wasn't really. So I made the decision, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave on a good note. Gave 3 months notice to my boss, 2 months notice to the company. And I left on good terms, which is always a plus.
Yes, absolutely.
Months off. And the contract I was working was in a recompete area, so I did not want to get involved in that at all. I literally, computer got shut off. I, went and did my stuff. I focused on me, focused on my health, lost like 50 pounds and so on and so forth. So 6 months goes by. Okay, I start re-engaging. I find LinkedIn because, okay, now I've got to do something. So for the first 18 months, I kind of just beat around the bush and figured out what I wanted to do. Didn't have a clue. The reason I can relate to individuals transitioning out of the military right now is because for the last 18 months, that's what I've been doing. I was looking for that next opportunity. And I reached out to people like Adam Fisher, Bill, Kiefer, just individuals that I could talk to say, hey, I've got a couple issues. Can you help me? I took advantage of the O2O program to improve get my PMP, self-improvement. I completely wasted an opportunity with ACP and have a mentor. My mentor was phenomenal, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I really wanted to do. I just didn't have a clue. And that's, you think about that and you go, well, that's kind of hard to rationalize. I mean, everything else you've said up to now is your hard charge. But the reality is been there, done that. And it was like, do I want to do that again?
Hey, no, you're absolutely right, Bernie. That's life. That's, a lot of folks have those. I knew when I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't want to do logistics anymore. And we talked about that, and not to not to disparage my background, in terms of the profession, there's a lot of, there's a lot of analytics and logistics, and folks get stuck on the analyzing.
Yeah.
It's that, hey, come on, guys, it's time to make a decision.
Paralysis of analysis. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, and I get that. And so you're not always going to know exactly what the heck you want to do in life. And career wise, it's the same way. So, here we are.
I reached out to people, I listened to all the advice that our veterans are receiving nowadays, and I took advantage of some of that advice. And the reality is I guess it works. I didn't have a lot of success with it myself, so I still had to find something for me to do that tripped my trigger. Jason Madden contacted me, and Jason's a great guy. He's into franchising. And he's like, Bernie, he goes, I'll tell you what. He goes, let me just send you some information materials. So he sent me a book, and it was basically everything that we've talked about. When you transition out of the military, identify what your goals are, what you want to achieve, some of those things. And over a 6 or 8 month period of time, we communicated back and forth. I went and looked at a few franchises. My wife and I did. We were accepted and qualified for a few franchises. And I said no. And the reason I said no was great opportunities, great people. But I had worked in an organization where I had a higher headquarters, and I had to pay the higher headquarters money every month for their services. That's just the reality.
Right.
The higher headquarters set up what the goals were. And of course I had input, but they were still part of it. And I didn't want that. So I took the idea that I'd worked out with Jason and I started a company. Now, my timing was absolutely horrid because so I started BLE Management LLC, and underneath that I would do some management consulting, and I've done some business development consulting and things off and on in the last couple of years anyway. So here's the kicker. I now own a handyman company. And you go, handyman company. Wait a minute. You're Special Forces, Green Beret. You were a corporate, involved in the upper echelons of corporate leadership. You were making good money. And now you're a handyman? Absolutely. That is me.
Heck yeah.
And part of it is, it goes back to my blue collar roots. It goes back to my experience. And what it really does is it makes business sense. Because I've done the evaluations, I've done the analysis. And if you enter something, just do the legwork. So my goal is, and I started all of this right before COVID hit. I was going in for my small business loan. I had the appointment scheduled and everything, and I called the banker. I go, hey, this isn't going to happen. I see it. I see the writing on the wall. He's like, okay. So I postponed it a year and decided I'm not taking a loan out from the bank to do this. I'll just start at grassroots. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 3-4 months. BLE handyman services, locally provided. 90% of my clientele are women. So those soft skills that I learned when I was, growing, they've come in very handy. Be reliable. That's part of business. You have to be reliable. You have to be approachable. You have to be communicative, and you have to be reliable. That's just basic business to everybody out there. So that's how it applies to my company. Now, tell me you weren't shocked when I said handyman.
Well, to be honest with you, no, because you found what it is you want to do. And I'm sure there's some purpose linked in with that as well. Who knows? Sometimes you wind up you don't necessarily stumble into something because, you seem to be a regimented person that, understands process and you're able to put things together. But once you're able to figure out what it is you want to do, yeah, it might be surprising to others, but if you can make a living from it and it's something you enjoy doing, something that makes sense to you, you're gonna, you're talking about your blue collar roots. All of this to me sounds phenomenal, and people that can put this together and make it work, that's huge. And I'm happy for you, and God bless you, man. I hope that you get everything and more out of the endeavor. However large or small you want this to be, that's completely in your hands because it's your business.
Right.
How you've gone about it, you didn't leverage yourself, financially with loans. I think it's a smart way to go about it.
So
You saw what was going to happen. I mean, hell, no one knew what COVID was going to all be.
right.
At first it was like the world's ending, and then life goes on. But you were smart enough to kind of take a measured approach to what you're doing, and I think this is phenomenal. I'm glad to hear this.
So Scott, here's the reality though. It's business.
Yes.
No one wants to be a garbage collector, but everybody would love to own Waste Management. Think about that. I mean, it's business is what it is. This is just another field of business, and I'm entering at a lower level than I would have probably 3 years ago. But just because that's where I'm at right now, But I'm also planning to the future for me and for the company. And like you said, it's an opportunity for me to apply the skills that I've learned in business, because it doesn't matter what you're doing. I don't care if you're a dog walker. I don't care if you're an astrophysicist. You're involved in business at some form or fashion. So this is my business. Maintenance, repair, operations, the MRO type stuff. So, I don't want to say I don't have the background in it, but if you had a glance, you'd go, I don't see it. But the reality is I'm having a great time. And here's what else I'm learning. I live in a military town. And there's a reason I selected this line of business is because I understand people are aging. They're aging out. The people that could do this work can't do the work. And the people that are younger, we're pushing everybody to go to college, and no one wants to do this kind of type of work. I got it. But I live in a military community. So what I do is, one, I always give I give discounts to military customers.
Right.
But what's really come to it is I like going out and doing extra stuff for them. I have a lady who called me up last week, and like I said, 90% of my customers are women, which is phenomenal. She needs a TV mounted, a TV mount put up. She has to repair a porch step. So I've already told her, I go, look, this is how much it'll cost to do the TV mount. And I'm already giving her like a 20% or more discount. But I'll come out and I'll do the porch for free. So I'm waiting to hear back from, I've done it for a couple other people. So when I met this lady, she goes, well, I was in the military too, but I was a whack. And I'm like, oh my goodness. She had COPD, phenomenal person. She's a veteran. She did 3 years, and then she did 20 more civil service. Just a great person. So that's part of me giving back is helping these people because I can still.
Right. That's tremendous. That my grandfather did that too in his small business that he had, post service and being a fireman. That's huge.
They need the assistance, so I have no problem. It makes me feel good.
Yes.
So I'm hopefully they'll appreciate it. or I don't even care if they appreciate it because I enjoy doing it for them.
Yeah, and isn't that? I think there's such a balance there. There's an equation, and as I talked about, I this just solidifies what I think about you. You're just adding to the goodness here, Bernie. My grandfather was a Marine. Fought in the Second World War. Did his 4 years, got out, and became a fireman in the Federal Firefighting Service in Virginia. And he did that for 30 plus years. Became a captain. They wanted him to be the battalion, the chief. And, it was in the 70s and the economy was having issues. They're going to pay him the same, but give him all the responsibilities of being a chief. And he's like, thanks, but no thanks. But while he was a fireman, he painted, homes, and he did handyman stuff, and he had his own business. And when you said that, the first thing that popped into my mind is that's my grandfather, who I respect more than anybody. He's moved on to heaven now, but he's the guy. If I could be a third of who he was, I'd be the best thing since sliced bread. And it means a lot to me to hear you say that, because his clientele, he was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of retired veterans there, and
Yeah.
during the time he was doing this, there were a lot of folks that were World War II Korean veterans who passed on, and then they had their widows.
Yeah.
And they're on fixed incomes. They have homes that are hard for them to maintain. And I remember, I grew up. I was the apprentice. I was scraping, sanding, and doing the kind of the grunt work. And then as I got older, he put a paintbrush in my hand, and then I got to be pretty good. When I was a teenager, 17, 18, I could cut in a window without having to tape it up. And
there you go.
I remember one day we got in the car. As summers in Virginia, it was sweltering humidity, and it was just a hot couple days of this big job. And we get in, we're done, and he hands me an envelope. He goes, "Hey, partner, put that in the glove box." So I looked at it, and it was a check. And I looked at the amount, and I put it in. I said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "What, that amount? Was that like partial? Was that like the end payment on this?" What? He's like, "No." I said, "That was the total amount?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was I was like 17. I was thinking, I said, "Hey, that seems really low." I said, "I don't really know a whole lot about all the cost involved in what you're doing, Granddaddy, but that just," and he's like, "Partner," he goes, "You know what? That's just right." He said, "That's a good day's work. And who else is she going to have to do some of the things that I threw in?" He said, "It's fine." He goes, "It's going to help her. Just like you said, I feel good about it." And so that's all anyone needs to know. And he didn't advertise that. He would help anybody. He was just a good guy. And that's so cool to see you incorporating. I mean, because better than anyone else what you could do and what you can't do,
right,
and what you're willing to do, right? And the fact that you're doing that says so much about you. And I think your business, I can't wait to see how things go for you over time. I think that's incredible, Bernie. That hits the heartstrings, but it also, we need more people like that who give a damn and who are willing to help. You don't have to put yourself in the poorhouse, but
right.
by God, help people, right? I think that's a hell of a business model. I'm happy to hear that.
Well, I'm trying to make it a business, not just a job. But if you can help a couple people along the way, and specifically, I try to help our veterans to a degree. Right. I can't do everything, but I'm enjoying myself. It's giving me purpose.
Right.
And quite frankly, for a while, I didn't have a purpose like that. So
yeah, and purpose is huge. I mean, there's purpose in life, in your personal life, in your business life. You have to have that, because if not, you become stagnated, and It's hard to find sometimes. And the other thing that I wanted to say, pardon me, as your business model, that there's a niche there, and I think you've absolutely come on to a smart target, that you're looking to acquire business in. because it's definitely there. And I know as I've gotten older, there's things that I just don't want to do. And so, you know what? I'd rather pay somebody that's going to come in and be able to do those things that maybe because I'm not as young as I used to be, it's become harder, or I just don't want to do that. And I'd rather pay someone that knows what the hell they're doing and, they'll get it done right. Because there's something involved there too, right? You can spend time, effort, money and look at a wreck, or you can get someone to come in that knows what they're doing. You might pay a little bit more, but in the end, it's going to be worth it. I've got rental property and I can't be at some of these locations because it's not here. It's in another state.
Absolutely.
So holy smokes. Yeah. I mean, I see this, right? You want people.
So you're thinking, you've thought about this for the last, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and the light bulbs are going off. Hey, this makes sense. I've done the complete analysis. I've done the SWOT analysis. I've done the demographics. I've done, what the average cost or house value is in the area, and what spending has been on home improvement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you look on my profile, Jason Madden actually, he gave me an attaboy down there. If you read the comment that he made and then think about what he's really saying was I analyzed the hell out of everything that he what he's really saying. He's saying, Bernie analyzed the hell out of this. So, but I have, and you know what, if it goes on for 6 months and I go, this just isn't progressing like I forecast, I'm keeping my doors open for other opportunity. Because in my heart, I still like being that businessman. I mean that upper businessman. But I am that now. So hey, So
well, that's a great story, Bernie, and it was a little surprising because I did not know that that's what you're doing now, and the big reveal for me, it was like, at first I was like, but when you said that, the first thing I thought about was there is an absolute market for that. And then when you add where you're living, and then you talk about some of the things that are important to you as a business owner, I see goodness in that all around. And I'm glad that you found something. And like you said, it might not be long term. It could be something that you just decide you want to do something else, whatever. But you found that sense of purpose. You have an action plan. You're executing. You're moving forward. And again, that lean forward thing that you talk about. It's like Herb Thompson has "Own Your Journey." People have their taglines. That's tremendous. So it's we're a little over an hour here, which is good. But at this point, I'm gonna wrap things up here, just only due to time's sake. We could probably talk another hour or more, but I do know that if I continue what I'm doing, kind of like you, I know that I want to bring you back on because I think there's more that we can talk about, and time's going to give us more more material too over the next few months or what have you. So, okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Bernie. It means a lot to me that you cared enough to come on. And I hope that the little time that we spent together, when people see it, it'll resonate with them. They'll get those nuggets out of it, like I absolutely do with you, and that they'll pass that information on to other folks too. And it'll help folks kind of see beyond the tip of their nose when it comes to what life's like outside of being in the military, and what are some things that I can put into my toolkit or that arrow in my quiver that'll help me as I go forward. And they see that there are people that are blazing that path, and so they look to folks like you as a mentor or someone that is able to shed light in what might be kind of a dark path for them. Because a lot of people are leaving the military, and it's not always straightforward. Sometimes they've got other issues they're contending with. And when
Absolutely.
You can see people who have, navigated that path, who are doing good things, and as I've said a number of times now, are reaching back and helping. There's this so much that's positive about that. And I absolutely appreciate your time today.
No, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate the invitation. I like what you're doing. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. I mean, you know that. So just let me know. And if somebody out there needs some help, you know, if I can't do it, I usually have someone that might be able to. You know, I haven't turned anyone away that's asked for assistance so far, as long as they have to be as invested in as I am. So absolutely.
Yeah,
No.
and I was I'm glad you said that, because I usually make this comment. If you are not connected with, in this example, with Bernard W. Jackson, you need to be. Send a request to him on LinkedIn, and you won't regret that you did. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of What's Next Beyond Service. Next week, I'm going to have April Mitchell on. She's an entrepreneur. She's a mill spouse. Her husband, I believe, is a Marine. So there's, again, talking about goodness, there's more of that coming. So hopefully that you'll be able to tune in next week and listen to all the things that she's going to share with us. So thanks again, Bernie, and we'll talk to you on the backside. So I'll stop recording now, and I just want to chat with you real quick before we hang up. So let me turn off the recording here.